Anupama Kapoor, and I work at the cusp of, at the intersection of gender and inclusion. Yeah. Uh, my story is fairly ordinary. It's nothing that many other women, sort of haven't gone through or lived through in their lives. But really, it's been a combination of many personal and professional experiences and journeys which have shaped where I am today. Um, and if I go back into time, I would look at, maybe back in childhood when I was maybe a middle schooler. And I have the kindest mother. She's an octogenarian now, and I have the kindest mother in the world who will always say yes to everything you ask, and she's always that very positive person. But back in middle school, I didn't see it like that. I was the youngest, or I am the youngest of three siblings. I have two elder brothers. And at that time also, I could see that, there was this element of asking or expecting of me to contribute in the household in more ways than was expected of my brothers. And while my mother was very kind and very loving, this was something I could never come to terms with. And for the longest time, I would speak up against it. I would rebel against it, and I would want to do things which were just the opposite. So if she, for example, wanted me to learn some cooking at some point, I kind of decided for life that I am not going to cook. I'm not going to be the woman who's going to be doing the cooking. So these little things, in my personal journey have shaped who I am today. Even today, if you push me in a corner and ask me to cook, the answer will be no. But yeah, I can cook, and I enjoy it when I'm doing it out of choice, when there's a compulsion. So really, that's how your childhood and your conditioning shapes you. So through my life, for example, my first job. Okay, I was living in Hong Kong. I was flying for an airline, and that airline went all over the world. And my peers and my bosses that I reported to, and the customers, everybody was a diverse nationality, global nationality, so to say. A lot of Asia, a lot of Asia packed, but also the rest of the world. So for me, it was very normal to imagine that this is how careers are, this is how lives are. That when you're speaking in a language which others don't understand, it's rude. You should be speaking in English when you're surrounded by people who don't speak your language. So these were the little things that shaped how I think personally and professionally. And so I've never been able to sort of divide these two journeys of my life. They're really closely intertwined to who I am today. And I think very strongly, I actually believe very strongly that whoever you are, these two things are always, sort of, maybe sometimes they go on a slightly parallel track, but most of the time they are integrated together, sometimes well integrated, sometimes you're not doing so well with that. It's not so harmonious, but it's really one journey to me. So, I was living in Hong Kong, and I was dating my childhood sweetheart. And then we decided to get married after many years of dating. And then suddenly there was this question about coming back to India, giving up my job to come back to India. And I did that. So I gave up my first job, my first break in the career happened when I got married. I was living abroad, he was in India. So I came back, So that was, in that sense, one milestone which sort of remained with me. And then, subsequently, one was working in India, and that was also an amazing experience, doing very well in the corporate world, very successful. And then finally, after many years of marriage, gave into the maternal urge and decided to have a baby. And when I did have that baby, I was working with a large corporate, and there was no concept of support systems and ecosystems at that time where young mothers could be supported in terms of their careers, with childcare, all the policies that you see today. So, but I was, I was a new mom. It was Delhi winter, and Delhi winter is very harsh. It was impossible for me to leave a newborn 3-month-old baby and go back to work and do 14-hour work days. So I negotiated, and I went on unpaid leave for another 3 months, after which the winter still wasn't over. And or I was rather making excuses at that time. And I bargained on a work from home model. This is way back in early 2000 when these models did not exist. And I said, I will come to work 3 times a week, and I will work from home twice a week. And we can always use the internal messenger. At that time, it used to be same time. There was no WhatsApp, and we can do that. And I will log into the global calls, and all that will not come in the way. I will work, but this is how I'll work. So they said, okay, fine, and they did that. Then after 3-4 months of that, they said, okay, and do note that while all this was happening, I was also doing projects. I was a Six Sigma black belt. I was appearing for examinations and getting my project certified. So all this I did while I was a new mom. But I was very clear that it's not something, I wasn't ready to leave my baby with help, even though there might be some supervision, and come back to work. Finally, after 9 months to a year, I gave in and I said, fine, okay, I should go back to work now. And I went back to work. But I was doing these 9 to 9 crazy schedules, Elsa, and I would come back home, and my little baby boy would hug me at 9:30 at night and not leave me. And it was heartbreaking to see how much you felt. He needed you and you were not around. And I obviously at that time I thought I had the choice. I discussed with my husband, and I thought I'll take a break for some time. Not realizing then, only realizing many years later, when a professor at the Research Center for Women's Studies in Mumbai here at SNDT said, was that a choice, a free choice, Anupama, or was that a loaded choice? And that's something again that got me thinking on what choice is really for women. But yeah, at that time I took the choice, and I quit work thinking, hey, I'm going to be a full-time mom. That full-time motherhood lasted for 3 months. I just wasn't cut out for it. I realized only after giving it up. Because I have been working for 11, 12 years, and I loved that. I loved working, and I enjoyed my work. And I also realized I was very happy working. If I wasn't working, I didn't feel, engaged enough, cerebral enough, productive enough with myself. Um, so I decided that I wanted to be the master of my own time. And that was really the kickstart of my entrepreneurial journey back then. I started with Six Sigma and talent management. That became wholly talent management because that gave me the flexibility to be home, unlike Six Sigma, which required me to spend a lot of time at client sites, figuring out their processes and advising them in what they can do better. So talent management was a big part of my journey till about 2009-10, when the discourse around diversity and inclusion started happening in India. One started reading about these things, and then there was some conversations around returning moms. And in 2011, I took a medical sabbatical. And when I came back from that medical sabbatical, it really was time for me to think as to what I want to do. Do I want to go back to a corporate career, or do I want to take up this journey of diversity and inclusion? And I think once again, the personal and the professional collided. And the fact that, I had given up my career, the fact that I was always maybe a bit of a feminist, even in the 8th grade, when I was standing up to my mom and saying, why do you expect me only to do these chores? And why don't you expect my brothers to do that? And why do you have to cook? And, why are you carrying the burden of the housework, on your shoulders only? All those questions never really got any answers. So that, and sort of encouraged by the fact that there was this discourse on gender equality that had already begun in India, really what started me on my journey of inclusion. And I started thinking about these women. How can I help women? How can I women first not quit? I thought that was a very important thing. And if they do have to quit, if there is really no choice, then how can I help them bridge that gap of getting back to their careers? Because I had experienced firsthand, even though I was an entrepreneur, you're not in a mainstream everyday going to work environment. And while working from home is therapeutic, it's liberating, it does have its challenges. And I'm talking of the before COVID era. Work from home. I used to work from home. People never took it seriously. And the only challenge in work from home was that there was never a constant peer learning because of the lack of peer interaction. If you're working individually, your growth as an individual was limited to the times you went out. And of course, coming back to the quick immediate context, when COVID happened, people were only working from home and not going out at all. And even though we are interacting online, social interaction, when you're able to see people and physically hold them, brings in its own, positive aspects, which are not there in online interaction. So going back to my story, Reboot was born from this real, it sounds cliche, but really being the change I wanted to see. And I said that what can I do from my experience? How can I leverage that experience and in doing something for women like me and helping them, sort of get back to careers, sustain in those careers, thrive in those careers. So that was really it. That's how Reboot was born. It's been a fantastic journey. Of course, there have been challenges, there have been failures and successes of different kinds, but it's been immensely satisfying. Um, and I mean, I wouldn't uh, trade Reboot for this journey for anything else. So when I started thinking about how can I help women, get back to work, I know that I knew firsthand that there is a lack of self confidence the longer you're away from the workforce, active workforce. And if you've not been working, if you've been sort of surrounded by motherhood or looking after the house or looking after the ailing parents or just being a stay-at-home woman or a stay-at-home mom, I knew that confidence was a big issue. You started doubting yourself and your own capability of going back out and performing at the level which is expected in the organization or in society. And I knew there were other challenges. As you move forward, technologies become obsolete. There are different business trends. The jargon changes. For example, we're talking about future of work. We're talking about Industry 4.0 and so many other things which we were not talking about 3 years ago. So if you've been a woman who quit 3 years ago, you would not know all what these jargons stand for, and much more than that, what they really mean and how they impact businesses and the trajectories that businesses want to take today. So the idea really was, how can I help them? And the other limitation in this whole project was, how do I reach out to these women? And I think that was a very interesting thing, because that's how Reboot was born. Reboot was literally born off a Facebook page. And that's how the idea of an online community really took place. That Facebook, as an online medium, was actually critical in terms of spreading the message out of what Reboot was, what it wanted to do, and subsequently, of course, LinkedIn and Twitter and all the other social media. But why I mentioned Facebook specifically is because women world over, and especially in India, tend to relate a lot more to Facebook, at least the women who are my target audience. And for lack of a better phrase, I will say my target audience is white collared women who tend to use Facebook a lot more than they would use a professional network like LinkedIn. So really the idea was to reach out to these women, connect with them, increase their consciousness about, hey, you've given up work, this is not the end of the world, this is my journey I want to share with you. And there are so many more so much more you can do. You can become an entrepreneur, you can become a freelancer, you can go back to work, you can work in different formats, you can take part-time work from home, or actually go back to a full-fledged career. So the journeys are for you to choose, and these are possible. So that's really pretty much how organic Reboot was in thought. And we really leveraged the online medium. We had women sign up on our website initially, and then gradually over time, we were using the online medium for webinars, for bringing in industry leaders and having them connect with women, aspiring women returners, get them have their questions addressed, provide them with access to resources like coaches, like mentors, helping them with the transformation, and also in terms of what has changed in their domain. So we've also brought in IT experts who've interacted with aspiring IT women, for example, who wanted to know, how can I get back to work? What is needed in my CV? How do I update my LinkedIn profile? So stuff which was as granular as that, to to conversations around sustaining careers, to conversations around leadership for women, and how you can sustain, and in an organization, how can you navigate your career better? How can you navigate the politics of an organization, for example? And how can you be women-led leaders of tomorrow? So it's really been a very interesting journey. In fact, while in this journey, I also worked with SPJMR, which is a B school in India, and we co-created India's first, and if I'm not mistaken, still the only full-time MBA for women returners. So that was again an amazing journey, because it's something that's never been done before. And when we went out and reached out to the communities in India, and said that, hey, this is a program, would you like to join? We have some remarkable case studies. And the first batch of 20 itself, so we had, for example, this woman who who is a mom of twins and was living in Hyderabad. And this is a full-time course. It's not a residential course, because we thought, hey, we can't have a residential course for women returners. We knew that the majority of the women returners are moms, and the reason they give up careers, the biggest reason is childcare and maternity. So, hey, we are not going to get any women who are from outside Mumbai. So here we are advertising to the Mumbai audience. And we had a woman from Hyderabad reach out to us and said, I want to join this course. I have twins, but your course is a day, a day course. So how am I going to do it? So we then created a hostel accommodation for her. She left her twins with her mother and mother-in-law in Hyderabad and came to Bombay for a year. So that's how aspirational this audience is. And that's how misunderstood this audience is about what, just because you've taken a career break doesn't mean you can't get back to work. And because you've taken a career break, maybe you want to take it easy. And all those are just myths that I love to dismantle on a daily basis. So that's pretty much what Reboot is in a nutshell. But the other thing that Reboot did for me was I felt I always had the inclusion lens, as I shared with you earlier, and it really drove home the point as I spoke to these women that it's not just the women that need help. We don't have organizations today that are ready to accept these women back. We don't have, and the men in the organizations, because men were the dominant workforce. Men are still the dominant workforce. So that's how my journey on working with organizations in diversity and inclusion and creating more inclusive cultures started. And that's how we launched Equal Half subsequently, which is really, I could say, the first forum which engaged men in corporate India on the discourse, saying, hey, are you ready to challenge the masculinities that patriarchy, in fact, has imbibed in you? You think you can only be a breadwinner, but can you also be the caregiver? Thereby empowering the women in your life to do much more than caregiving, because caregiving is not going away very soon from the Indian cultural family setup. We are still a very collective society, in many ways. We are not individualistic completely like the West. We are in transition, a very slow transition. So it's very important to engage families. It's very important to engage the men to say that we understand that, the fact that you think you are the breadwinner and therefore you can't be the caregiver is something which is also a part of your social conditioning, just like it is. There are many such social conditioning attributes that are given to men unknowingly, women unknowingly, sorry. So, but the first step is to become conscious of those masculinities that are preventing you from embracing these gender equality. And there is research available globally that, from Undo Global, from other organizations, that shares that when men decide to become caregivers also, families are healthier, they bond more, men are happier, more content, because in a way they found a channel to express themselves, which the traditional notions of masculinity don't allow you to. This is something I have always struggled with. And I'm thinking, when you're saying influencers, you also mean people who maybe inspired me or helped me pivot to doing some things that I did. So this is a mixed bag for me, because and for a long time I felt, is there something wrong with me? I don't have a role model. I don't believe that Indira Gandhi is my role model and I want to be like her, because I've always believed that human beings are not perfect, right? So we actually seek out from people the traits we want to role model. So the onus of role modeling, actually, or getting influenced or getting inspired by others, really stems from our own needs, is my strong belief. Okay. Having said that, I don't think I could be where I am today without the kindness and the love and care with which my mother brought me up, even though I challenged her a lot at that time. Of course, now, after all these years, and having gone through the journey of motherhood myself, and age and wisdom, I am much closer to her. I understand where she's coming from. That's something feminism has taught me, that I understand that it's not her, it's the patriarchy which is ingrained in her. So she's been a tremendous influence. My mother-in-law, she's also an octogenarian. She's been a huge inspiration in that sense that she's worked till she retired. She tried to work even after she was retired, but her health didn't support her. So she has this long, illustrious career. But even today, with 3 kids of her own who are settled and well settled and happy with their families, she's not dependent on us at all. Not physically, not financially, not emotionally. She lives on her own in Delhi, and she's the one who's always giving to us. So if you were to ask me what I want to, what kind of person I want to be 30 years from now, I want to be like her, independent in every which way. She was driving till about 5 years ago. She's now given up because, so these are influences that shape how we think, right? I can think back, um, in my early career when I was working in the corporate world, to maybe a few male mentors who were really, uh, and that time we were not using this vocabulary. We didn't have mentor as a vocabulary, but who were able to understand. And when I negotiated about the arrangement of working from home, who, without HR policies in place, helped me with that, mentored me through my career when I faced challenges. Again, both parties not knowing that I am seeking mentorship, and that party not knowing that they are actually doing that. They just believed in your merit and believed in your performance and potential and supported you. Um, I'm deeply influenced and inspired and encouraged by my set of friends. God, I mean, I'm thankful to God that I have friends who I can reach out to every day for little challenges that you face. They inspire you with their journey. Influenced by a friend who just last week, whose son is in the 8th grade, just wrote a distraught message to us, very relieved finally, saying the final for math is over, math exam. And my son was so distraught, and we knew about her journey and her son's journey over math as a subject. And I finally agreed that we are giving up maths for good. Now that is inspirational, if you ask me, Elsa, because in our society we can't give up math if you're a boy. You can't give up math so early on, and as an Indian parent. So these are little gems of inspiration that shape who we are. I am inspired by this. I have a help at home who's got 2 kids. She's divorced. She's got this divorce abusive husband who comes to her house from time to time. She works 12 hours a day, and she manages her 2 kids on her own. I mean, it's inspirational. So these are the amazing set of influences I continuously seek from, in my life. And I've always find it a challenge when people ask me who inspires you. So of course Michelle Obama is a great woman leader to look up to. The challenge is that when we get into this space of looking up to certain women, for example, and then you get unfortunately let down, like we recently were by somebody again in the finance world, uh, it's very disappointing. So I find it, that my model of inspiration works. I seek inspiration from you, Elsa. You are doing so much for women directly and indirectly through say women like me. So that's inspirational. I mean, I would want to do even if I can do a fraction of your journey, I would find that I would be content with what I have done. So I think the credit for that also goes to the dean of SPJMR at that time, Dr. Ranjan Banerjee. He was thinking on those lines, and like I said, the returner discourse had already begun in corporate India, conversations. So he was also thinking about doing something for returners, and somebody known to both of us introduced uh, us to each other because I was working with Reboot, and it just clicked very well because it just made so much sense. Why can't we invest money, invest resources in doing something like this, something meaningful which recognizes that women are aspiring, women have this need, and there is this gap which can be filled at the higher education level. And most importantly, Elsa, the model of these schools works with placements at the end, you know. So that placement model needed to be in place for these returning women, because they were investing so much of time and money in studying, at sacrificing so much more, with with their children and with their families, that the placement model had to be in place, which is again something which a B school is able to bring in, because leverage, they were able to leverage their existing placement relationships to make sure that these women had the opportunity to appear for job interviews at the end of the course. So really, it was a meeting of minds, you can say. So the first batch was launched at the beginning of 2018. I would imagine over 100 by now, because there was one batch every year. Uh, Good question. The idea of success, I think, of course, is different for different people, but I think it also changes with time. It changes depending on which stage of life you're at, and it changes also which stage of career you're at. And I don't typically want to refer back to the Maslow's pyramid for this, but really, pretty much like Maslow says, I think the idea of success will be, the phase I'm in will right now, for example, be more about self-actualization than it was probably 10 years ago, you know. Uh, but I think my idea of success has somehow always been around social impact. And I say that because um, there was a point of time when I was thinking, my friend, I brought my friend Gopika, my very old friend Gopika, on board as a co-founder, and we thought that we will try to scale Reboot up, sort of countrywide in a bigger way, globally, Asia wide, and globally if possible. But our first goal was Asia, and we put two minds together. We did everything possible. We reached out to many organizations. We applied for fellowships to incubator programs and stuff like that. It wasn't successful. But the idea of success at that time seemed to be able to scale it up and also monetize it, right? Um, for whatever reasons, XYZ, that didn't work out, right? And now Reboot is back to its social path. But one of the reasons it didn't work out was, and Gopika and I discussed this a lot, and maybe it was something that also unknowingly was communicated to the audience that had to invest in us, that I was always very socially minded. And for me, money has not been a factor of success, uh, especially now more than ever. So for success, I would define it as the number of women I'm able to reach out to, uh, and and the belief actually is dependent on the fact that I very strongly believe that everything else, for example, the work you do, around sexual harassment, right, in public spaces, or the work around violence against women, I strongly believe all of this is intrinsically connected to women's economic independence. If women are economically empowered, they have agency. They can decide to walk off if they walk out of an abusive relationship, decide to develop more agency in the household, develop take part more confidently in decisions which impact their own children without society. We all know that, right? So for me, impacting women's thinking is as important as enabling them with the equipping them with the tools to get back. For me, that little moving of the needle, a woman questioning that I don't need to, I don't need to necessarily wear a sari or wear sindoor, or keep the Karwa Chauth fast to prove to anybody that I am, I am a good married partner. You know, I don't want to go the path of wife or husband. I'm just saying that I am an equal partner in this relationship. You know, so therefore, if I am economically able, I will be able to decide for my own. And I actually have seen that with my mother-in-law. But she's so she does what she wants. You see what I'm saying here? So it's very clear in my mind that economic independence is the foundation on which we women need to stand, and therefore for me, success is about changing your minds, making you more aware. Yeah, I mean there are definitely regrets. Yeah, I mean we are all human. So and I've asked this question myself a lot, and I think that I do regret giving up my work. And when I say that work, I mean giving up that mainstream path. I would have, I mean, I imagine now this is an afterthought of all these years and looking back. I love what I do, and I love the journey, how my journey has shaped out to be. Some of it very intentional, some of it just happened. Um, but I think it would have been also interesting to not to see how what would have happened if I hadn't given up work when I did my full-time job, stayed in that job, maybe till I was say 40 or something, and then become an entrepreneur. I think that journey would have been somewhat different, might have impacted the work I do uh, differently. Uh, so maybe a little bit of regret around that. But other than that, there's nothing else I regret. I don't for a moment think that, yeah, but if that meant I had to give away the time that I got to spend with my son, yeah, I don't regret that at all. So I would, young women, I would ask them to invest in their education, first of all. You know, while I'm all for continuing education, and I'm in fact the role model for continuing education, I'm as I speak with you, Elsa, I am enrolled in an online course on behavioral science from Ashoka University. So, but I would ask them to invest in their higher education. If they are from privileged backgrounds, by all means, they must do whatever they can to push for higher education. If they are not from privileged backgrounds, we are in a much smaller world today than we were say 20 years ago. Thanks to the internet, we are a global village now. Leverage as many scholarships, fellowships across the world that you can, but invest in your higher education. That's one. That is also the right stage to fight for continuing to work and not get married and given to all the social pressures that come from your families and society. So stand up, speak up, dig in your heels if you can as much as possible. Take support in that you know in that space from those who are willingly supporting you, whether it's your aunts or friends or family friends or whatever. Uh, I think that's the right time to be able to jump in. Today's world is ready for, especially for young change makers. Jump in. Don't doubt yourself, and you can actually do so much. I'm so inspired once again by so many of my friends, daughters especially. Elsa, they are so confident, so bright. They write so well. They're able to sometimes debate out feminist concepts so much better than some of us. So I'm really very excited and inspired by the youth of today, and I think they should just give it all and go for it, and definitely not give up their jobs for anything. So if you're looking at life partners, uh, please by all means believe in the notion that you are when you're getting married, you're not just marrying the guy or the partner, you're marrying their families. Look into your mother-in-laws, look into in their journeys. If they are working, chances are you will work too. If they haven't been working, you may succumb to some pressures. Don't do that, uh, and just hang in there. Yoga, and it's not something that I'm not a ardent yoga yogic, so to say. But yeah, I do my yoga 3 times a week. I go for yoga classes. I listen to music. Um, I'm a foodie. I enjoy my food. So I will binge from time to time on food as well as Netflix. So, this is an interesting question, Elsa. I saw this. This is an interesting question. Um, I don't think women have, especially our generation, um, we've never stopped living sustainably. So it's not something we have to do again. In fact, if I look back, I think my mother, my God, she's the epitome of living sustainably, and I have imbibed from her. So all those discourses around, um, making sure you're using recycling your clothes enough, wearing the same clothes over and over again, not shopping extravagantly, serving yourself as much as you can eat, therefore little at a time, whether you're at home or outside somewhere, uh, making sure that there's always greenery around you. Today, for example, my God, we are in this online era. We tend to order so much. So when COVID started and suddenly we had to resort to online ordering, I was aghast at the amount of packaging material we were consuming. And therefore, one had to discipline oneself, saying, this is not something I want to do. And there was no way to recycle that with at least Amazon. You could recycle that with the guy who came downstairs, but even that got reduced during COVID because physical interaction wasn't possible. Even the chaps who came to collect your recycled goods were not allowed up. So what we were doing really was, then we were disciplining ourselves to order together, and creating distance between the frequency of ordering, so that the number of packaging material coming home was limited. So I think we've imbibed that. It hasn't been a lesson from the West for us. We've been eco-feminists all throughout. I think my mother was the first eco-feminist I ever came across, and we've just lived that lifestyle. Whether it comes to clothing, whether it comes to food, or anything else that we do. This whole those memes that you keep seeing around, the 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 bulk we collect in terms of plastic bags in Indian households. We keep collecting to recycle. We don't throw away. That's how the concept of sustainability in India is. It's very old, actually. I think it's when I started thinking about reboot. I think that completely changed my life, both personally and professionally. Uh, and it gave me a window to a new Anupama. Uh, if I hadn't thought or decided to take up the challenge of reboot, um, I think I would be somewhere else today. And I wouldn't have had the pleasure of the last 8-9 years.